What's up, cycling junkies? We're back with another episode of Pack Chatter. We got a lot of fun for you on this one. Kind of a wild show here that we'll jump into in just a minute. Before we get there, though, let's hit some sponsors. First, we're sponsored by NISBRA, the New York State Bicycle Racing Association. NISBRA does all the behind-the-scenes work in amateur racing in New York, calendars, coordinating a lot of the work there, a lot of the stuff with officials. So they're a great organization, a lot of hardworking people there. Hit them up on their website and hit them up on Facebook. We're also sponsored by Legacy Bikes. That's Legacy with an I, Legaci, bikes.com. Owned and operated by my man Todd Chesky. You can get your kid a balance bike through him. Lots of options, lots of different models, and a lot of fun. So spring is coming. Get your little one a balance bike and get out there and have fun with it. My daughter was riding hers with me around the farm just the other day. I got my fat bike out and she's riding around on her little pink Strider, and we had a blast. So it was a very cool moment for the first time to actually ride together like that. And she's not even 3 years old yet, and she's able to do that because of that bike. So make sure you get yours going. It's super fun. We're also sponsored by, once again, Nut Butter. They are an employee-owned company that produces a superior product for their customers. They're committed to sustainability, and they spread integrity. They also are huge supporters of endurance athletes and have been for many years. They've supported many of our endurance events and cycling events in Western and Central New York, where they're located, but certainly do so across the country and are well known across the country. If you live in Western New York, you can get their product under the Wegmans or Tops labels in their organic butters. Those are produced by, once again. You can also get them under their own label in various stores throughout the country. So check out, once again, Nut Butter for a great race fuel and for a great company that supports endurance sports. We're also sponsored by Castelli. They've been innovators in cycling clothing all the way back since 1876. They were the first to develop Lycra shorts, first to develop colored shorts, first to develop sublimated logos, first to develop thermal clothing, first to introduce a women's collection back in 1997. If you know cycling, you know Castelli, you know they're at the forefront of cycling clothing, and we're really proud to be associated with them. We're proud that they're the official clothing of Dirty Bikes Gravel Series, and we're really thrilled to have a relationship with such an amazing brand with such an amazing history. We're also sponsored by the Dirty Bikes Gravel Series, presented by Van Bortle Ford, a 4-race series filled with prizes and giveaways. Each race features punchy, heavily gravel courses of 35 to 45 miles or 15 to 20 miles, making for hard, fast challenges for seasoned road and cross and mountain bike racers, and accessible entrance to gravel for new riders. This year we're giving away $11,500 in prizes throughout the series. That will include 2 gravel bikes from our friends at Growler, winners jerseys from our friends at Castelli, 192 jars of Once Again from our friends at Once Again, and lots more. We have non-competitive classes as well, and those non-competitive classes are e-bike friendly, so you can come out and race the course, you can come out and race your friends, you can come out and just ride the course and ride it as a group ride. All the races have a great after party. We're kicking off with a pre-ride on April 5th from Steuben Brewing, we'll look at the Prattsburg gravel course there, and then go back for some beers and live music. And then we'll go back to Steuben Brewing the following week for the first race of the series on April 11th, where they'll be featuring Beer Tree Brewing as well. And that will be the Prattsburg Gravel Classic, which will kick off the first race of the 2020 series. So for more information on that series, go to ridelcc.com or register directly on Bike Reg. We have a new segment here that we're doing as well as part of that. we're offering a free promo to any race out there that wants to get their name out. All you have to do is send us a promo code for our listeners. So the first one here we're going to do, or the second one I guess we've done here, is the Strada Verde race presented by Team Towpath in Rochester, New York. The code is Verde5, VERDE 5 on Bike Reg. It'll save you 5% on your entry fee. Strada Verde is presented by Team Towpath and Green Mountain Energy, and they're presenting a USA Cycling sanctioned race for racers who have trained all winter with the hopes of early season glory. The race is intended to give riders a mass start and the opportunity for upgrade points for Cat 4s, 3s, and 2s. The race will not have bells and whistles. The expectation should be that you are there to get your upgrade points. And it'll be scored accordingly. The race will cap the GVCC Spring Giro training series. It's a circuit race with 4-mile laps. The course is rolling hills with a top of the hill finish on a little short punchy climb. And each group will get a neutral start from Dreyer Park in Victor. So if you're looking for an early season road race, hit them up on Bike Reg, sign up for Strada Verde, and get some nice hard racing in early April on April 4th. All right, so let's get into the show here. This episode, we got a phone call, or got to dial in here with our good friend Steve Cullen, who's been on the show a couple times now, and he called us in from literally the first hours of Butcher Box's team camp in California. So we got to hear a few of the riders on the call. Some of them were coming in from a 6-hour ride that they'd done. Some of them were just getting to the house for the first day of the camp. Steve, I believe, had just pulled in before the podcast and was getting situated. So it's kind of a cool listen, because you get to sort of really get the feel of what it's like as these riders are hanging out at the house. We discussed the American Crit 2 film that just came out this week that features their team. You should definitely check that out if you haven't seen it. And the focus of their schedule this year, which is to be the first team in history to win the men's and women's USA Crit Series. They won it last year on the men's side in fairly dramatic fashion. It was an exciting year, and you get to see some of that in the American Crit film when you check that out. But this is the first year that they've had a women's team, and they have a really stacked roster going into 2020 with that women's team. So they're pretty confident, or at least hopeful, that they can take the title in 2 different categories there. So without any more from me, please enjoy listening to the crew from Butcher Box.
You'll never go out on a training ride and dig that deep.
Awesome. We won gold.
They're life rides.
I'm like, dude, I'm still figuring this out.
Lose sight of the fact that it's whoever goes faster.
Yo, this isn't a road race. This isn't a mountain bike race.
The sensei of sprint, Todd Shefke.
My eyes are coming out of my head. Just get in here.
Yeah, there'll be a little bit of the house ambient noise in the background, but I think that's indicative of team camp.
Yeah, no, that's cool. It'll be cool to get that experience and hear sort of what that's like. This is the first day of team camp?
The first few hours of team camp?
Nice.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. It involves a lot of hearty backslapping. Yes. A lot of hell yes.
All right.
Carl's Oceanside Band. Carl's Oceanside Band. And we're going to be posted up here for a little bit of practice and some early preseason racing, and meeting with some of our sponsors out here. And it's 4 days of this, hanging out, bike racing, bike riding, and some team work stuff. And then most people stay on. Most of this crew stays on for a handful more days, and then we transfer over to the first press event for USA Crits in Birmingham, Alabama, where it's a little bit more of the same, where we got several press events in the morning. There's a school visit for the Ronald McDonald Foundation. Yeah, then we have another charity event that evening. I have to split up the team between both those charity events, which is cool. Then we race a preseason race for fake real money. Fake real money on. It'll be everybody's there really racing, and they do hand out cash. I grab you and Mom.
In the sleigh.
In the sleigh, yeah. I'm ready. When you're ready, come down. Okay. And then we have a really cool Fondo event after that. That's like a big supporter ride where you come out, ride fairly chill. There was 4 crashes last year on that ride. It was a significant amount of carnage that happened, but it involves a couple climbs, a lot of talking, a bunch of snacks, and then afterwards there's a huge barbecue. So it's a real cool time. So this is the most full time of the year for us, is literally these 15 days. After this, it gets a lot easier after these days. And it's also the first time that we've ever gotten all of our crew together. This year, when we travel, we're going to have a micro entourage of anywhere between 14 and 16 people per event.
This is not a micro anything. This is a full gas entourage.
Full gas entourage.
Right.
Well, we have a film crew out here, photographers out here, and we have an embedded journalist while we're out here on top of that. So it's a fairly significant undertaking over here.
Yeah, definitely.
That sounds like a serious camp. And you're coming right off of American Crit 2 just coming out a couple days ago. How's been the initial response to that? I know, Steve, we talked like when the last one came out, and you said the response was mixed, I guess, to put it lightly. What's it been like this time around? I noticed there was no profanity in this one. I felt a little gypped on that, by the way.
There was Simon, so that's the work of Simon Reikovic, and from Attack Pictures, and he does sports documentaries and sports films for stuff, and he's a big fan of. Hi, Harriet. Hi. Harriet's going to be joining us as well, so you'll have Harriet Arnold and Kristen Arnold when she gets in. This is
awesome. All right.
Interviewing. You're being recorded right now.
No pressure.
No pressure. But don't worry about swearing. But,
yeah. You swear all you want with us.
Harriet's known for her incredibly foul language as well. So.
All right. So yeah. So how's the response been to the to the movie? I just watched it today. So.
I watched it. Yeah, Simon. Like I said, Simon does sports documentaries. He works with a bunch of different teams. He just loves going in and following teams through different races or challenges that they're under. And he kind of he's kind of become a friend of the program so much as that he kind of discovered us. I don't know, Adam, 2 years ago, something like that? Yeah. 2 years ago, he came down and filmed Adam and the team just on a whim at Gateway Cup, and then he came back this year and kind of put together this piece to celebrate this season. So I watched it with Harriet for the first time, I don't know, 2 nights ago or something like that, over some challenge. So yeah, it was. It's really great I think it's really great for the sport to have someone that goes in and shows what it's like behind the scenes as a team that works really hard and shows all the human stories behind it, and had a nice mix of history. Tulsa's an important event, so it's great that people see it. And I don't know, how's the response been? I haven't really.
I thought it's been overwhelmingly positive. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think people are psyched and ultra jealous that they don't have a
Simon
hour-long documentary.
Yeah, I think our hope is that Simon does these all out of the goodness of his heart, and it's important to note that he at the most we help pay for his housing or something while he's out visiting with us. He really does this out of a love for the sport. So the guy's kind of one of those fucking heroes out there, like a race director that just shows up,
I'm not going to say I'm a hero, but I'm pretty much a hero.
not a race director. Like they put on a race, like they own a race.
No,
like not
promoter.
A promoter. Yeah.
What are you?
Way different, right? Yeah. Oh yeah. No.
I thought that's what you were saying.
No. Jesus Christ. Is that what it sounded like? This is why people hate my fucking guts.
This job's like the one I have.
No. Oh my God. No. Jesus.
Not everybody can be a hero like me, say.
This is. I've just unlocked why things are the way they are in my life.
Because we're not here to like do
Yeah. Like a what would you call that? A race promoter.
Yeah.
A race promoter. Thank you. Like a race promoter, they just kind of like keep showing up and doing these great things for the community and maybe not always getting paid for that type of stuff. And so Simon's the same type of guy, is that he does this for a lot of different teams and for different races. And so his work's super important to the sport. And so I'm glad it's gotten a really positive response from everybody on that. What did you think, Harry? You just saw it for the first time. What did you think? You can say anything.
I think it was good.
Yeah.
I think people's feedback was this gives us an insight to American crit racing.
Yeah.
More of glitchy box are really cool.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big things that we were worried about, is not worried about, but we just didn't want to make sure it didn't come across like a propaganda piece, because it's not like we're hiring Simon to do these things, so it's much more, our agreement to do this stuff is to help promote the excitement of the sport, not necessarily, of course it's great that the team benefits from it, like that's great, but yeah, well, that's good to hear. Cool.
Yeah, I
it
thought
was nice to hear the storylines. I think it does a good job, kind of telling the story of who you guys are and getting us to know a little bit more as fans about the individuals and the dynamics of the team and those kind of things. And I thought this one was particularly strong that way, whereas the last one was still very good, but maybe a little more focused on just the intensity of what crit racing is, as opposed to the story behind who you guys are.
Yeah, and I think what we hope is that we are kind of a representative metaphor for what a lot of teams are like, So it's American criterium scene is mixed with even for someone like Harriet, who's at like a.
Hi everyone.
Hi Olivia.
So great to see you all.
Hi. Hello. Hi Kristen. Hi.
Easy.
Hi. So even for someone like Harriet, who's one of the most winning bike racers in North America last year, they still have a day job and they're still have to pay bills in the off season. This is also, Kristen has also joined us and will be, if you have the energy, you can join us for the interview. Do you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. So I hope it shows that, and I think that's a lot of what we've heard so far. Is they were like, I had no idea that people racing at that level are like in school or working. Hi, Julie. Hi. How's it going?
Good. What's going on here?
We're doing an interview that you can be part of, or not. Fine. So I think that's cool for people to hear. I mean, I hope one day the sport gets to a level of financial ability where people can sustain themselves from the sport. From being an athlete. But I think that the way that modern athletics is working is that a modern athlete just has to be so much more than very fast. They have to be like a great communicator. They have to be charismatic. They have to be really adept at social media and how to integrate, the proper brand relationships into that stuff. And that's really what the value is. It's going to take some time before you can really monetize that significantly. And so as of right now, we try to do our best to equally pay the men's and women's programs to help sustain that. But this program is still probably a year or two away before I can pay living wages for that stuff, So I think that's what I've heard back from people is they're like, holy shit, I didn't think those guys had fucking jobs. And it's like, yeah.
Yeah. And I think, some of the stuff we talked about before, Steve, was, in putting forward the sport. And I think a really cool aspect of it is the rider backgrounds, because it gives you a way to identify with who everybody is on the team. And I think that's really cool. And people start to kind of see now when they come to a crit and I put it up on my social media today and with some comments and when people come to Rochester or whatever and they see Butcher Box come out there and go like, oh yeah, I watched this thing and I know who these guys are. These guys are the blue collar workaday guys, man. And they're out there duking it out, man. And it's awesome, and that identification is key.
Yeah, and I think you'll see more of this from teams in the future. Is that they'll whether it's like whether they pay to have those stories told themselves or they get lucky and the media picks up on them. I think that's kind of the key. If you look at what Red Bull does for their athletes, they invest huge amounts of time in reality TV style episodic programs to go into F1, to go into surfing, skiing, blah blah blah. And that's where it's at. I mean, the race event itself is just like so many sports. It's much better. It's much more like the WWF, where you kind of follow the storyline for all month. And then there's a wrestling match where you get to see the final culmination. But what you're really following is the soap opera.
It's also rigged, much like.
Our hope is that Simon has energy for one more to do American Crit 3 with this year to help focus on our women's team and to go behind the scenes and show that story. And we're hoping if he has the energy, these types of projects almost kill him. But if he has the energy, we'd love to have him back out for either Athens and Speed Week to follow the ladies, or maybe Tulsa again, but probably maybe something, or like a stretch between Boise and Salt Lake or something like that, to show the women's side of the sport is the same as the men's, except I think it's just changing at a faster pace. There's more and more talent flooding in to the women's side of the sport. So I think every year it gets drastically different. The men's side kind of evolves 1 or 2 degrees every season, but the women's side of the sport makes huge leaps at 10, 20% every season. There's still some of the veterans like we have on our team, like Harriet and Kristen, who've been on the scene for a while, winning and racing at a very high level, but there's always new athletes coming in, and it's happening more on the women's side. So I think it's really one of the most exciting parts of American racing is happening in the U.S. women's crit scene.
Yeah, I was actually thinking maybe the Crit 2 movie. I was actually going to ask you about that, about the women's aspect to that, and if there was one in the works to highlight them, because women's racing has I don't know. I mean, I haven't been in the sport a long time, and I think in the last 10 years, really seeing women's racing really come to the forefront, because it's really exciting to watch women's racing at this point. I mean, it's good racing. And to be able to highlight that in a similar type of movie, I think would be really, really cool. I think it'd be another huge step forward for them.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Harriet and Kristen can speak more to the state of it, but I think that on our program at least, we just treat it like racing. We just say there's no difference between men's and women's racing. It's just bike racing. There's not. I've always said there's no such thing as women's bike racing. It's just bike racing.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, and you definitely see. I mean, like you said, because of the changes have been so big, but I think they've gotten a lot more professional, and I think the racing and the spectators are responding to it. It's kind of feeding off of itself. It almost has its own energy now, and it's just really exciting to see. And you see it at the top levels of the sport. I mean, from national team stuff, and I'm just watching. I don't know if you guys watched any of the track worlds last week. I'm still watching through, because one day of track worlds is longer than my training every day, so it takes me a little time to get through it. But seeing how well the women are doing internationally, and obviously even domestically, then is really huge, and to see how really almost kind of a dominating force U.S. women are on an international scene. So, yeah, I'm hoping he has the energy too, because I'd love to see an American Crit Racing 3, or maybe a variant of that. Maybe it's not even American Crit Racing. Maybe it's something else.
Yeah. Have you guys noticed much of it? Have you guys noticed much of a difference in the last few years on the domestic scene?
There's definitely been a shift towards criteriums. I mean, unfortunately, there's less state race teams for women, hence why we accumulated some of those records.
Yeah.
But there's been a big shift towards more criteriums. I mean, I remember Speed Week, or really a lot of the big crits 4 or 5 years ago, would have 20, 30, maybe 40 riders, and now it's like we're pushing the entry fees. Like Tulsa had a wait list to get in, which that was not even, we weren't even half last year.
Wow.
So.
Yeah. So that's already. Yeah.
How would you compare the women's scene in crits with some of the other disciplines of cycling? It seems like whether you're talking about cross or track or mountain, or even what's emerging in gravel, that there's a lot of really exciting women racing in all of those areas right now, and the racing's really good in those areas. How does crit stack up with some of those areas?
I mean, definitely.
Harriet's like, if it doesn't involve tail gunning a crit until the last 2 laps and then sprinting, I really can't
I have
comment.
no idea.
I'm not dealing with it, right?
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with tail gunning.
Some of us still live.
I would say that, well, criterions are, it really is, especially with the USA Crit Series, it is a team competition. So as opposed to a lot of the other disciplines where women, I mean, there really are a lot of privateers. Like there's a lot of women just out there to support themselves because that's what's available. If you want to get it done, you have to do it yourself. But there are more programs like this one available for women to actually be involved in, not just themselves.
Does that make crit a bigger challenge? Both probably for men and women, just for all of you guys in terms of developing a team. Is that a bigger challenge because the privateers it's not as easy to be successful as a privateer as you're seeing like with maybe gravel or cyclocross or some of those other disciplines? Like you really have to have that bigger team aspect.
No, I think that's getting driven a lot more by how brands want to interact with sport, right? Like there's a super enticing model in sports marketing to say we will just endorse individual athletes and then give them subcontracts, right? And that's like the Red Bull model. Whereas you can play for anybody, we don't give a shit. We just want that helmet. We just want the helmet and then this, right? And that allows them to tap into and do subcontracts with a lot of people. But you never really get to tell the story yourself. You know what I mean? Like you're always just at the behest of other athletes. And so when we looked at, that's something that we talked about with ButcherBox as well, is whether we should have a stable of athletes where we individually sponsor them. But we thought it was a lot more important to invest in a team atmosphere where you can achieve much greater things, you can tell a much bigger story, you can have a much bigger presence instead of athletes sprinkled across a whole bunch of disciplines. You can really have a significant presence. If you look at it this year, what our partners are getting is when we show up to a town event, for example, we're going to be able to do a Meet the Pros ride and a school visit in the same day, and that won't be a stress to our team. So you're going to get double community engagement. Well, because the women will go do a school talk. The guys will go do a Meet the Pros ride, right? And that will be low stress for both. But we'll
do the opposite of that.
Yes. All you can eat buffet. There's going to be an all you can eat buffet, community buffet. Eat with the pros. Sam will go to that one. Sam will go to Eat with the Pros, and then the ladies will go to actually wine with the pros. And then
You joke. That sounds great.
that sounds really good. And then you'll see, like when we hit the stage this year, there's going to be something particularly crazy and exciting for fans to watch. Is that our program is going to be racing for 3 hours straight. So like that's a huge thing that our sponsors and partners get. Is like the name ButcherBox will start at 5 o'clock and will stop at 9:30 p.m. And you know what I mean? Like that's a massive thing, and you can't get that with a helmet. You can't get it with the helmet. You can't get it with like, oh, no one says, hey, fucking Red Bull athlete up the road. They will say that athlete's name. But when you race in a larger program like this, there's a bigger purpose and there's a lot more strategic things, and so you can have a lot more media presence. So there's a lot of reasons why the team model is really good. The hard part is that it just requires a massive fucking infrastructure to go with it. So, it's like if you look at something like like you can see, like just to get what we want done at an effective level, and we're not even doing absolutely everything, that we would do with unlimited budget, but it's still 14 to 16 people traveling per event, and that's just the minimum viable amount to make sure that human beings can like show up and do stuff and perform at a high level. So,
well, that seems to create a really great support network for the riders too, to have that team to feed off from, and the dynamic that you guys have seems pretty exciting. Can you kind of talk about what that looks like for the women's team as you bring that out? It seems like in the film you talk a lot on the men's side with guys who had been in programs and had difficulty with different issues, and you kind of brought them back and brought them together, and you had some great storylines there that unified your guys. Do you have a similar dynamic going on with the women's team? Is there a similar issue that you unified around, or is it different? How does that work?
Yeah, I think on the women's team, it's there's the story that we have for the women's team is actually it's a fairly outrageous collection of talent on the women's program, where pretty much every single starter that we have in our women's six is like a proven multi-time national level race winner. And the challenge is how many times in sports do dream teams absolutely fucking implode? And so and you put all the talent together and then they end up mid-table. And you see this happen in the Premier League all the time. They go out and buy. No, hold on. No, I'm saying that's the challenge, right? That's the challenge. The challenge is all. Yeah, Harriet just looked at me and she was like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah, what do the riders think about this, Steve?
Yeah. And I was saying that's just what the challenge is that they're all so exceptionally good and successful that you only get. I think the thing is everybody says, the USA Crit Series, it's all year long. It's not. It is only 10 fucking races. That's it. It's playoffs. Day one, your first race is a playoff. And the clock starts ticking. So you don't get any fucking chance to fuck up. So like there's zero. You don't get any mistakes. Except you get one major fuck up. What we've proven is you get one. You get one really, really big fuck up in front of your team and you all die. But you get one. So on the women's side, I think the thing that's really exciting to see is these are all athletes that you've seen that have raced on, internationally. They have, I forget, I've tallied it up, but I think that the total historic win record for this current roster is like close to 100 wins or something like that. It's fucking stupid. Wow. So yeah, it's out of control, right? On paper, it's
just Harry too.
It's just Harry. It's just Harry. I haven't even looked at it. And so the challenge is to get some of them have raced together in past teams, but really it's they come together and they literally, like if you take Nat for instance, I mean, you're still within 36 hours of getting off a plane.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? And then she'll be racing Saturday morning at 11 a.m.
Damn.
You know what I'm saying? So it's that's the challenge is that it's like you don't get anything. You just get off the plane. You have to meet everybody. You have to go to master class on teamwork and get together instantaneously. There's no time to fucking have hidden agendas or bullshit. If there's a problem, it needs to be fixed immediately at that day before you leave the course, because the next race also counts. And so it's incredibly high stakes. And then these women have outrageously high success standards. Like I don't think they came here to do worse off than they did last year. So it's a really interesting dynamic to see. That's what I think is so exciting about their program this year is how quickly they can come together. And I think if I just put them all in the same kit and then threw them on a start line, they're still going to win 20 races this year. The question is, can we go higher than that and do things that haven't been done before? And I think it's no mistake that we're trying to do something that hasn't been done before. No team's ever won 2 national championships in the same year, and I think that's a pretty exciting challenge.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's the big one is winning nationals, but on the same token, from a sponsor standpoint, the other, it's kind of like that's your validation in some way, but from a sponsor standpoint, things like Tulsa and some of these big races, as you can see if anybody watches after this interview and they watch the American Crit 2 and you see the size of the crowds, and I know some of you guys have been to Rochester. I know John Harrison was there last year, Danny was there last year, and you get 30,000 people out there.
Got fourth in that race. Sam was fourth.
And Connor got second.
Fuck
John Harris.
Yes. I'm only bringing up John because I know John better. well, you guys are all coming back this year, but yeah, when you get those kind of crowd, I mean, that's that's paying the bills kind of thing, right? But also along with that, I mean, because National just doesn't usually get the eyes of the crowds, but you guys also have you mentioned a Fondo as well, right? That you guys are doing, and how is that integrating into your marketing strategy?
Yeah, we have a couple, there's a lot of these events have Meet the Pros rides that are pretty cool. Like Tulsa has them, Birmingham has them, Boise has one. I think Salt Lake might have one as well. And then we also have officially this year, we have an official charity ride for the Dempsey Foundation. Patrick Dempsey and one of our supporters is going to have some of us out there after the seasons, the finals of the season are over to go and race that and help raise awareness around the cancer research that they're doing. So, yeah, we try to do as much of that as we can, to be honest. This year, USA Crits is doing a give back promotion. They're doing a give back preem during every race where the preem value is split between the athletes and a cause. We also have our program, Stakes for Slayers, where every month our athletes will nominate an undercategory racer to win basically a nutrition supply for the year and also be elected to get a pro kit at the end of the year on that type of stuff. And then we also donate, every year our program donates a couple $1,000s to local race creams as well, and not in the pro race. So we always support the undercategory races for that. So, I think like any organization, Butcher Box Cycling is trying to help, spread sports bigger than just the racing that goes on. And I think USA Crits is also doing a good job of that this year as well.
Yeah, I mean,
Very
that's
nice. So
go ahead, Tom.
So when you talk about doing what nobody's done before, you're talking about winning that USA Crits title, right?
Yeah, that was a pretty big one for us. I think
that's a pretty big one, right? So as you guys are looking at that, do you have this mapped out sort of now that you've done it once with the men? Do you have it sort of mapped out strategically on how that translates for the women? Is it the same approach or different?
Yeah, it's going to go exactly. I can tell you exactly how it's going to go every second of it.
Every second? Perfect. You're going to tell us now so the competitors can hear it?
I'm going to tip your hand here.
That's part of, yeah, there's a bit of it that is other teams will have to wait and find out. But I think there's a level that's why we're here at Team Camp, is to talk about that stuff together and to work through those details and to go through what the season looks like, where we think the strengths and opportunities are, and where athletes are motivated to do. We work pretty hard in the off season conversationally. We get together, get on the phone once every couple of weeks to go over some major team topics to get aligned on that stuff. So, without getting it too specific, I think on the men's side, there's going to be 3 very strong teams, and I think obviously Legion is a major force to contend with. And on the women's side, I think we will, on a national level, we'll be up against. We won't really race Tibco very often. I don't think at all. We'll race CWA here and there, and they're pretty talented. And then I think some of the talent's been distributed across several teams. I think if you look at Wolfpack, has got Summer's pretty solid, and they have a good team. They also have a great director. Mike Sayers is one of the top race directors in the country. He's not going to let that team fuck up too much. So he's going to be. I'm doing that to tease him. Mike's a friend of mine. He's a really good director. I think we lost LA Sweat from the series, but there will be 10 women's teams on there. To be honest, I think we're the team to beat in that series, and I don't mind saying that. But every team's beatable. Every team's beatable, no matter how good you are, and we have our work cut out for us on both sides. I think on the men's side, our advantage is that we really already know our riders inside and out on the men's side, and so we've already made a lot of the major adjustments heading into this season on how we're going to race and how we're changing our racing and evolving. You're going to see a much different team than you saw last time on the men's side. On the women's side, I think if you look at the resumes of our riders, you can guess how we're going to be racing pretty much from what the resumes are, right? The key is you still have to get it right, and you still have to do it 10 times, and you really don't get the chance to fuck up even once. So I think there's a lot of challenge on that. The women's racing has just got a lot of new teams that have new composed, so it's hard to say, right? You know who the athletes are. We all have done our homework. I mean, the good athletes are the good athletes. Plus, there's always going to be 2 wild cards that are going to have the season of their lives, right? Every sport has someone's going to have a breakout season, and you're going to say, "Oh my God, how did they get so good?" It's going to happen on the men's side. It's definitely going to happen on the women's side. But it's really interesting to see as the talent has reshifted, and the Schneiders went places, Summer went places. As they all kind of move around. There's some World Tour riders that have matriculated to the U.S. Valentina Scandalara is racing in the U.S. this year, so. There's just an influx of talent. How much they race USA Crits, how well they race with their teams, how committed their teams are to being awesome, how fast those teams adapt to what we do, we're going to be a fucking nightmare. And so it's going to, how quickly they adapt to that and how quickly they adjust is all part of what makes the sport the sport. So I think it's a little bit more open on the women's side. And I think on the men's side, I think there's pretty much an established pecking order going in. Like you can probably predict what the top 5 teams are in order right now. And it's up to us to break that pattern and to disrupt that and do better than predicted.
So when you talk about, you said you're going to see a different version of the men's team. What are we going to? How does that change? It seems like the first year you were kind of very much the underdogs. Then last year maybe rallying around that as well, and then coming out on top and having these sort of hard luck stories that are bringing everybody back and rallying around those things. Are you able to keep that same energy and that same focal point for your guys, or do you have new people coming in, and does that shift for this season?
I think the biggest distraction that we have is that Sam's flies down. I think that's probably the biggest distraction that we're facing this year. That we're facing right now.
Well, you got a couple days of camp to get it rectified, and
once we get that problem solved, we'll be fine.
The question is, Steve, where are your eyes right now?
Yeah. So I think for what's going to change for us is I just think that last year on the men's side it took about half a year just to get into the groove of racing together and to figure out really where our strengths were and it took a while to actually understand how good we really were at the time. And I think heading into this year, we have a lot greater understanding of what our capabilities are on a national level. And you're just going to see a much more confident, organized racing out of the men's team this year than you did last year. And the way that we finish the season is the way that we're going to start the season this year.
I think that's a great point. I think we're all looking forward to, it finally kind of clicked in the last 4 races, and that's over halfway. And, we're all psyched to just hit the ground running like we finished. That's a good point.
Absolutely. And on the women's side, I don't know.
Oh, we'll hit the ground running.
Yeah.
I'm so scared for everyone.
Yeah, me too.
It's gonna be just a slaughter.
Yeah. What do you two think is well, now that Julie's here too. Join us, Julie. Julie is now eating crushing. I would argue crushing chips right now, protein crushing them with reckless abandon. What do you guys think your top challenges are in the next 2 weeks?
Figuring out how we not get in each other's way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the 3 of us that were on a team together last year kind of know how each other rides, but it's just incorporating 3 others into it. So yeah, that there's not issues with just figuring out when someone's gonna go and what they need from you, is pretty much because I mean that was a problem. It's like with any new team, right? So you just don't know how people are gonna race until you race, right? So I think we got pretty good. We still got in Harriet's way last year.
There'd be a point where I'd be like, just get
Just get out
out.
of my way. So it's just figuring all that stuff out. But I know what she's gonna do for the most part, and she knows probably what I'm gonna do. So it's just figuring out what everybody else knows, what everybody else is gonna do. Yeah.
So for those of us who never have and never will be at the level that you guys are at, can you explain to us what it's like to figure that out? How do you do that? What does that mean to figure out how you race with somebody and how you know what they know and what they're going to do? How does that develop when we're doing what you guys do?
I mean, I think you kind of have an inclination just from watching them race in years prior. But then I don't know, it just becomes once you start really riding with each other, Harriet knows if I just attacked and now I'm off the front by myself, she knows that I'm not going to stay out there. That's just she should get ready to counter me, and I know she would. But it's we all know for someone like Whitney, the other person that we've all ridden with over the years, the way that she
rides is, she can go off the front and she
What's up, man?
she knows like how to really go for a long time. It just takes, we've all been doing this long enough that it's like we know how to gauge people's professionally how they're gonna ride pretty fast. So it would take me to suss out how Nat's gonna ride. I already kind of know because just racing against her. But halfway through the race, I'll probably know how she's gonna go. And then we also communicate a lot in the races. So if someone feels like shit, it's gonna be like, hey, Harriet, you're on your own. Or Harriet can be like, hey, Olivia, looks like it's you today. So communication is also key to it.
And a big thing that we're doing this year, a big thing that we do on this team. Thanks, Julia.
Sorry, was that okay?
No, that's great. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I think what Julia's speaking to is a lot of the in race dynamics that the only way you can suss those out is but through actual racing is you develop that intuitive sense. I think a lot of the things that we have to do this year is hack that through getting a common language and understanding of what our expectations as an organization are, being more explicit and clear on how roles are defined and what they're doing, and developing a huge thing that I'm a proponent of on our team is a common vernacular. The thing that we can't do is show up and just say, hey, we'll figure it out today because you only get 10 shots, and if you fuck it up on the first one, you'll be digging out of a hole for the whole year. It's not like a world tour where you have 70 races where you can throw the first 5 away to learning. We have to already know by the time we show up, right? So a lot of what we're doing here on team camp in these first 2 races, which are real races for real money, but not actual points, is we're taking the time to practice things. We're taking the time to literally break out a whiteboard, identify people's roles, and then have them embrace and select roles that they want to execute, agree and commit to doing things in races, and then doing those things in races. And then afterwards, if those things do or don't get done, there was a clear deviation from a plan where we can ask why that happened and if that's the best thing. So I think this is where top level organizations succeed, is they do the invisible work that doesn't involve pedaling a bike. At a certain point, everybody pedals a bike equally as hard and fast. Maybe Olivia and Harry a little bit faster than Sam, but I think also true. But I think there's a lot of things that you can take. The New England Patriots don't say, hey, let's use the first quarter to figure this one out, guys. Let's just see how we're feeling in the first quarter. They don't do that.
So as you're recruiting riders into your teams, you're obviously thinking about some of these things, how they fit. Are you communicating this with riders as you're recruiting them? Are they coming into the team knowing this is kind of my role and this is how I complement everybody?
Yeah, no, I think that when you had a conversation with every rider, I feel like you probably already had an idea of what they were capable of for the team.
Yeah.
So
I think you had an idea of what you wanted.
No, this is good. This is good feedback. I haven't.
I think not many women's teams do really great lead outs, so I think there must. I think I've seen some good 2-rider lead outs, but I haven't seen a lot of good full team lead outs. And I think also part of that is that women's teams don't have the depth, and I think we have the depth to do it, but it's still about learning and executing. And then I'm sure there's going to be differences to the way that our women's team lead out compared to how the men's team lead out. So we have to also make sure we're not just taking what the men are doing and just slapping it onto the women.
Yeah, there's an interesting thing about that to learn of it is that the speed differences change the timing of stuff in a way that, I went through and watched all the women's USA crits races again in the off season to see what the timings were like. The percentages of the race statistically operate exactly like the men's. So what races do at times are the same as what they happen in men's races. What's really, really different is how the races finish. They finish very differently. Yeah, it's so funny. In the men's races, a different guy wins every time, but in the women's races, it's the same 3 riders. So I think, I think the principles of race strategy don't change because physics don't change, right? Like bike racing is all about manipulating physics. It's about making and breaking patterns and using physics to overwhelm your opponents. That's literally it. It's all fucking that. So once you start to see it like that, like it's fluid physics, it doesn't really change what happens between men's and women's racing. The thing that changes just a little bit is the timing on how long certain things take. Men's professional leadouts are 15 to 20K long, something like that, basically 35 minutes long. They're basically 35 minutes long. That would be over half of the women's race. So if there's, and the more teams there are, the sooner the lead outs start. So if there's 4 teams, there's only so much room at the front of a race, right? So once the office gets filled, the race is over. So there's a race to set up and fill the office space. So the more teams there are trying to do that, the sooner the lead out starts. So on the men's side, if there's 3 teams, that lead out starts. We had Boise start 38 minutes out. It was halfway through the race, the lead out started. And then at Salt Lake, we predicted it would start at 35 and it started at 40. And Connor, I remember Connor getting on and saying, there's no fucking way we're taking this from 40. And then 2 laps later, he's like, all right, we're all going to the front. Because there's only 20. Once the lead outs take over, the top 5 is decided. The trick is only a few people in the race know that's what's going on. So on the women's side, we'll be one of the few teams that has absolute horsepower ability. And so the likelihood, what hasn't been seen in a long time, and I'll call it right now, and you can put this on the fucking podcast, blah, 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 is that leadouts are going to start 20 to 25 minutes out from the finish line. And that's, I almost guarantee it. Because once you start the setup process, you're going to initiate the swarm. Once the swarming starts, you have no choice but to ride as 6. Therefore, leadouts are going to start 20 to 25 minutes from the finish line. Therefore,
what's the difference in time between the men's and women's races in duration?
Right now, it's about 30 minutes difference. That I predict will change. The reason
so the women are an hour and the men are an hour and a half? Yeah, okay. What do you think? Is that going to change? I know that's a big conversation in cross. It's not as big of a difference in cross, but it's a big conversation between 50 minutes and an hour.
Yeah. Women's crits leading 45 minutes is fucking stupid. It's a base. If my ladies ever got to a 45-minute crit, I would just tell them to ride the front the whole fucking way. It's one big lead out. Like fuck everybody. You know what I mean? Like there's not even bike racing at this talent level. So I was just talking about this with Harriet and Nat the other day, but we were just saying that like those time restrictions were set up when the fields weren't as deep. So it was ridiculous. It would be like having a men's road race that was 300 miles long. It would be impossible to make it a race. It would be a death march, right? So with crit racing, when the field sizes were smaller, sure, 45 minutes when you only have, like you guys were just saying, 30 riders, that's a great race, right? But now you have field sizes of 85 deep. I'm hoping very, very soon that you're going to start seeing 75-minute and 90-minute women's crits. For that very reason is that the quality level's there. Things that my guys have been voting for the longest time is women's twilights. Yeah. They've been hollering for it for all year.
I've been asking for our crits to get shorter, personally.
Stan's been looking for basically a scratch. You could just... Yeah.
He's looking for a 15K scratch race.
Yeah. Well, I think 2 of the things that my guys and our team have been lobbying for all year, all last year, was women's twilights.
To flip our races.
To flip the races, to get more women's twilights, so they get the stage, and longer crits for the big ones, so there's more, so they get more real racing. I think part of the challenge is that sometimes when you watch contemporary American crit racing, sometimes you're like, well, this is almost guaranteed to be a bunch finish. Like if you look at a flat track like Boise, right? When it's 60 minutes long, everybody just races it like a sprint because they're like, it's almost guaranteed to be a sprint. Well, because you don't give anybody a fucking chance to race. Like the reason why Boise gets interesting as a men's race is because it's an hour and 55 minutes long. I have some very interesting predictions for this year's men's Boise. But for women's racing, like almost any 60-minute race is like, that's very hard to make anything happen in 60 minutes because the sheer momentum on a flat course, so many athletes can hide. It's very hard to do it. You need a very difficult course to make something happen in 60 minutes. So when you're like, oh, well, women's racing always breaks into a bunch sprint, It's like, well, that's now because the field sizes are not the race distances aren't corresponding to the field size as effectively, and so you have to make it more interesting. This is just like what happened, and this thing happens in cycling all the time. Like, look what they did with the Tour de France. Like, they stopped all the drugs, but they didn't shorten the Tour de France, and it was the most boring race on earth because they were racing courses made for people coked out of their fucking minds. You know what I mean? So it's like everybody's like, you guys weren't attacking. I was like, fuck you. It's 7 climbs in one day. What do you want me to do? Get to the. So it's the same type of thing. It's the same type of thing is that cycling has to make adjustments for changes. Now, so in women's racing, the fields are supercharged with horsepower now. There's 80 women. There's 80 fucking women racing. You have to make the courses longer to get the racing to happen. You know, so there's more things that happen, or else you're going to get a guaranteed bunch sprint out of a lot of these races, you know, because it's just almost impossible to smash them up because the fields are so huge that there's always 10 riders fresh enough to do something.
And for the ladies that are there, is that the feeling that you have and the feeling that you're getting from the other women on the other teams, that they all want to see these longer races as well?
If there's inequality and it has no real reason, get rid of it.
Yeah, and I would definitely go and agree with what Steve has put forward there as reasons as to why those are. And seeing larger women's fields, it definitely makes sense. I mean, you see the quality of the racing and you see the quantity of racers, and that will make sense because he's absolutely right. I mean, when you sit there with 15 women in a race like there was years ago, man, even 45 minutes was a little painful.
It's a long way for just 20 athletes. It's like you start off in a break. You know?
Right. Yeah. The race is over at the beginning, and it's kind of like, okay, so now everybody's noodling around waiting for the sprint. But now when you start getting you got mass and you got momentum now in the field, and the racing is good, and I think the spectators will support it as well, and they are supporting it. So not just will. It's not even a prediction. They are supporting it, and I think you see it on the higher levels of racing too. And that's why I think the women's racing is super exciting right now to see that evolving, and if promoters can keep pace with that and say, 45 minutes, now it's an hour. Now we're going 75 minutes, and now you have parity.
We're hoping this year that we're looking at Littleton. We're hoping to get We're hoping to get Littleton or Salt Lake to flip the races so that the ladies get a twilight on that. I think we're still we've been trying to work with USA Crits for it, and we haven't quite got the traction we've wanted from that. And so we're going to try to go directly with race promoters and try to get some of those put together. Just because the justifications we've heard for not having women's twilights are pretty boring and pedantic and antiquated, in my opinion. So I just want to see. You're going to tell me one of these fucking races can't do one fucking twilight? One. Thanks, Sam. Yeah.
What do the payouts look like across the series? Are those even yet or no?
Those are even. Yeah, and USA Crits was one of the very first series to ever do that, regardless of field size. And in the arguments, I don't want to hear these arguments that equal pay for equal work. So this type of thing, we're saying, well, the field sizes aren't big enough to justify that. So here's an argument I hear all the time, and I fucking hate it. There's 150 men and there's only 65 women. Why should they get paid as much? Cool. So why send a pot? Why would they race as much if they're not getting paid as much? Why would they do that? Like, you're not sending a signal that there's a reason to have a bigger field size. So you're like, so I think you have to take that step to say it's like saying, hey, we're not going to let women vote because they aren't voting very much right now. It's like,
it's a stupid argument, especially at a pro level, because it's not like the field payouts are based on the money that you put in to enter, right? I mean, it's not like we have this much money because this many people entered, and then we're dividing the money up among the people that entered in like some sort of, I don't know, some sort of alley cat race or some shit. Yeah, like it's a professional sport, and you have this much money, and you put it in there no matter how many people are competing, you would think.
Yeah, and then the PRT and USA Crits both do that, so that's fine. I think it's just a matter of. I think the one change we'd like to see this year is we'd like to see one USA Crits with a women's twilight. That's
right.
And Steve, when you say women's twilight, you're talking about making it the last event of the evening, right?
Yeah.
Just so clarify. Yeah, I just want to make sure we clarify so people are like, well, I'm going to these twilight races. They're called twilight, and there's a women's race. And so, what's Steve talking about?
Yeah, I mean it's
Right.
the very last one. The very last one, fully dark, in the dark, under the lights, doing the thing.
Right, right. Yeah, I think it's getting. If it's not the time in 2020, it's the time in 2021. Because with those field sizes, you're getting quality racing, you're getting exciting racing. The women have really anteed up their game for sure, and spectators are there. So when you look at it from an economic model of, well, we want people to be there. Well, yeah, it's hard to get people to come watch 15 people race, but if you got 80 women lining up and the racing's good, people are coming, and that's paying the bills.
Yeah, that's it. I think that's. So we'll see. We'll see it this year. We're gonna push hard for one of those to do that. I don't know. I don't know if we'll be able to force it, but we'll try.
When we talk about equity here,
we have time for one. I have time for one more thing, and then everybody's lining up for dinner.
Gotcha.
Right.
But here's my last one. Then this rounds it out. Do all the ladies have cowboy hats yet?
No, they're gonna probably. I don't know. They might do their own thing.
I'd like a Legionnaire's hat.
All right.
Like a what?
I was gonna say that,
They have to figure.
Oh, wait,
The ladies are. We're not sure. We're not sure if the guys are. Are we gonna stick with cowboy hats this year for the guys?
Don't worry.
You guys got to stick with the cowboy hats. Come on, it's too trademark now. You got to do it.
Yeah. It's
At least one more year.
Travel with. It really is.
Lightning.
I don't know. We're gonna have to figure out if there's gonna be a thing this year.
Not if.
There's gonna be a thing. Undoubtedly, there's gonna be a thing.
Don't know what that thing.
I don't know if the ladies will do what the ladies things will do. Legionnaires have it. We still do have the standard thing that every 10 wins is a tattoo. So that's still
Interesting.
Yeah.
Who gets to pick the tattoo though? That'll be maybe that's more significant.
On Steve. I buy. Oh no, I buy. So every 10 wins, I fund a team tattoo.
I don't want to stop winning it now.
Can we pick we're not.
Yes, it's yours. Last year we all got.
If I win 10 times, I get to pick what gets tattooed on you.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. That's fine. Yeah.
Oh, great.
Adam for the win. Sam just killing himself to get Adam up the road. Anything from his earlobe down. Yeah, no, I can't. I'm not gonna. Yeah. I'll get Adam spelled out on the side of my neck. Great, fucking super cool. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sure. Fine. All right. Thanks, guys.
Hey, thank you guys. Have a great night and a great camp.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
We'll be following all season.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Lots of fun, guys. Thanks.
Bye.